So we are starting the chapter 15, Body Fluids and Circulation. You have learned that all living cells have to be provided with nutrients, oxygen and other essential substances. Also, the waste or harmful substances produced have to be removed continuously for healthy functioning of the tissues. It is therefore essential to have sufficient and efficient mechanism for the movement of this substance to the cells and from the cells. Different groups of animals have evolved different methods for this transport. Simple organisms like sponges and coelenterate circulate water from their surrounding through their body cavities to facilitate the cell to exchange these substances. Sponges and coelenterate circulate water from their surrounding through their body cavity to facilitate the cells to exchange these substances. More complex organisms use special fluids within their body to transport such materials. Blood is the most commonly used body fluid by most of the higher organisms, including humans, for this purpose. Another body fluid, lymph, also helps in the transport of certain substances. In this chapter, you will learn about the composition and properties of the blood and lymph, that is tissue fluid, and the mechanism of circulation of blood is also explained herein. Blood. Blood is a special connective tissue consisting of a fluid matrix, plasma and formed element. किस किस से consist होता है? Fluid matrix, plasma and formed element. Understood? Once again, fluid matrix, plasma and formed element. So next is plasma. Plasma is a straw-colored viscous fluid consisting nearly 55% of the blood. Plasma का percentage है 55% of the blood. 90 to 92% of plasma is water and proteins contribute 6 to 8% of it. 90 से लेके 92% प्लाज्मा का वाटर है एंड प्रोटीन का कंट्रीब्यूशन है 6 से 8% of it. Fibrinogen, globulins and albumins are the major proteins. Fibrinogen are needed for clotting or coagulation of blood. Globulins primarily are involved in defense mechanism of the body and the albumins helps in osmotic balance. Globulin primarily are involved in defense mechanism. Globulin ऐसे याद रख सकते हैं GD, globulin defense mechanism, ठीक है. And albumin helps in osmotic balance. Albumin helps in osmotic balance, AO. Plasma also contains small amounts of minerals like sodium, calcium, magnesium, HCO3 that is bicarbonate, chloride, etc. Glucose, amino acid, lipids, etc. are also present in the plasma as they are always in transit in the body. Factors for coagulation or clotting of blood are also present in the plasma in an inactive form. यहाँ पे चेंज करके एक्टिव फॉर्म कर सकता है बट करेक्ट है इन एन इनएक्टिव फॉर्म. Plasma without the clotting factor is called serum. Plasma without clotting factor is called serum. Next is formed elements. Erythrocytes, leukocytes and platelets are collectively called formed element. Erythrocyte, leukocytes and platelet are collectively called formed element and they constitute nearly 45% of the blood. Erythrocytes or red blood cells RBC are the most abundant of all the cells in blood. A healthy adult man has on average 5 million to 5.5 million of RBC millimeter की power -3 of blood. A healthy adult man has on an average 5 million to 5.5 million of RBCs inverse power 3 of blood. RBC are formed in the red bone marrow in the adult. कहाँ पे? Red bone marrow in the adults. RBCs are devoid of nucleus in most of the mammals and are biconcave in shape. They have a red colored iron containing complex protein called hemoglobin, hence the color and the name of these cells. A healthy individual has 12 to 16 grams of hemoglobin in every 100 ml of blood. कितने ग्राम? 12 से 16 ग्राम of hemoglobin in every 100 ml of blood. This molecule play a significant role in transport of respiratory gases. RBCs have an average lifespan of 120 days, after which they are destroyed in the spleen, that is graveyard of RBCs. Leukocytes are also known as white blood cells, WBC, as they are colorless due to lack of hemoglobin. Due to lack of hemoglobin, they are colorless. They are nucleated and are relatively larger in number, which averages 6,000 to 8,000 mm की power -3. They are nucleated and are relatively lesser in number, which averages 6,000 to 8,000 mm की power -3 of blood. RBC का क्या था? एरिथ्रोसाइट्स का 5 मिलियन से 5.5 मिलियन, और ल्यूकोसाइट्स का क्या है? 6,000 से 8,000 mm, और एरिथ्रोसाइट्स का 5 मिलियन से 5.5 मिलियन. अंडरस्टूड? चलो आगे बढ़ते हैं. ल्यूकोसाइट्स आर जनरली शॉर्ट लाइव्ड, इनकी लाइफ छोटी होती है. वी हैव टू मेन कैटेगरीज ऑफ WBCs, granulocytes and agranulocytes. Neutrophils, eosinophils and basophils are different type of granulocytes. Neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils. NEB. Neutrophils, eosinophils and basophils are different type of granulocytes. Neutrophil, eosinophil and basophil are different type of granulocytes. Understood? While lymphocyte and monocyte are the agranulocyte. Lymphocyte और monocyte किसमें आते हैं? agranulocyte में. Neutrophils are the most abundant cells, जिसका परसेंटेज है 60 से 65% of the total WBCs. And basophils are the least. basophils सबसे कम है, जिनका परसेंटेज है 0.5 से 1% among them. Neutrophils and monocytes 6 to 8% are phagocytic, cells which destroy foreign organisms entering the body. Neutrophil and monocyte का परसेंटेज है 6 से 8% are phagocytic cells which destroy foreign organisms entering the body. और जो basophils है जिनका लिस्ट, उसका परसेंटेज है 0.5 से 1%. ओके. basophils secrete histamine, serotonin, heparin, etc. and are involved in inflammatory reactions. Eosinophil, that is 2 to 3%, resist infections and are also associated with allergic reaction. Eosinophils allergic reaction में क्या करती है? associated है allergy reaction. ठीक है, यहाँ पे डायग्राम दिए हुए हैं. lymphocyte का परसेंटेज है 20 से 25% are the two major types B and T forms. Both B and T lymphocytes are responsible for immune response of the body. Both B and T lymphocytes are responsible for immune responses of the body. Platelets, also called thrombocytes. Platelets are also called thrombocytes, are cell fragments produced from megakaryocytes. Platelets are also called thrombocytes, are cell fragments produced from megakaryocytes, that is special cells in the bone marrow. उनको क्या कहते हैं? megakaryocytes. Blood normally contains 1,50,000 to 3,50,000 platelets mm⁻³ Blood normally contains 1,50,000 to 3,50,000 platelets mm⁻³. Platelets can release a variety of substances, most of which are involved in the coagulation or clotting of the blood. A reduction in their number can lead to clotting disorder, which will lead to excessive loss of blood from the body. A reduction in the number can lead to clotting disorder, which will lead to excessive loss of blood from the body. Understood? Next is blood groups. As you know, blood of human beings differ in certain aspects through it appears to be similar. Various types of groups of blood has been done. Various types of grouping of blood has been done. Two such grouping is the ABO and RH are widely used all over the world. First is ABO grouping. ABO grouping is based on the presence or absence of two surface antigens. That is, they are chemicals that can induce immune response. Antigens are chemicals that can induce immune response. ABO grouping is based on the presence or absence of two surface antigens on the RBCs, namely A and B. Similarly, the plasma of different individuals contain two natural antibodies, that is protein produced in response to antigen. Antibodies क्या होते हैं? Antibodies are protein produced in response to antigen, और antigen chemical that can induce immune response. Clear? ठीक है, चलो आगे बढ़ते हैं. The distribution of antigens and antibodies in the four groups of blood A, B, AB and O are given in table 15.1. You probably know that during blood transfusion, any blood cannot be used. The blood of a donor has to be carefully matched with the blood of a recipient before any blood transfusion to avoid severe problems of clumping, that is destruction of RBC. The donor's compatibility is also shown in this table, which I am going to read. So the blood group name is A, antigen on RBC is A, and antibody in plasma is NTB, and donors group A and O. ब्लड ग्रुप बी जिसका एंटीजन है बी, एंटीबॉडी इन प्लाज्मा है NTA, और डोनर ग्रुप है बी और ओ. ब्लड ग्रुप है AB, एंटीजन है ऑन RBC A एंड B, और एंटीबॉडीज इन प्लाज्मा है नील. पीछे का कमरा खाली है, और डोनर्स होते हैं AB A B O. ब्लड ग्रुप है O, एंटीजन ऑन RBC नील, मतलब नहीं है. एंटीबॉडीज इन प्लाज्मा इज NTA एंड बी, और डोनर्स ग्रुप ओ. यहाँ पे एंटीजन का आगे वाला कमरा खाली होगा. अंडरस्टूड? फ्रॉम द अबव मेंशन टेबल इट इज एविडेंट दैट ग्रुप O blood can be donated to person with any other blood group, and hence O group individual are called universal donors. Person with AB group can accept blood from person with AB as well as the other groups of the blood. Therefore, such persons are called universal recipients. Next is RH grouping. Another antigen, the RH antigen, similar to one present in rhesus monkeys. Hence, RH is also observed on the surface of RBCs of majority, nearly 80% of humans. Such individuals are called RH positive, and those in whom this antigen is absent are called RH negative. An RH negative person, if exposed to RH positive blood, will form specific antibodies against the RH antigens. Therefore, RH group should also be matched before transfusion. A special case of RH incompatibility, that is mismatching, has been observed between the RH negative blood of a pregnant mother with RH positive blood of the fetus. Understood? A special case of Rh incompatibility mismatching has been observed between the Rh negative blood of a pregnant mother with Rh positive blood of the fetus. Rh antigen of the fetus do not get exposed to Rh negative blood of the mother in the first pregnancy, as the two bloods are well separated by the placenta. किसके through separated them? By the placenta. Understood? However, during the delivery of the first child, there is a possibility of exposure of the maternal blood to a small amount of the Rh positive blood from the fetus. In such cases, the mother starts preparing antibodies against Rh antigen in her blood. In such cases, the mother starts preparing antibodies against Rh antigen in her blood. In case of her subsequent pregnancies, the Rh antibodies from the mother, Rh negative, can leak into the blood of the fetus, that is Rh positive, and destroy the fetal RBCs. This could be fatal to the fetus or could cause severe anemia and jaundice to the baby. This condition is called erythroplastosis fetalis. This can be avoided by administering anti-Rh antibodies to the mother immediately after the delivery of the first child. Can be avoided by administering anti-Rh antibodies यहाँ पे चेंज करके anti-Rh एंटीजन कर सकता है. करेक्ट आंसर है anti-Rh एंटीबॉडी टू द मदर immediately after the delivery of the first child. Next is coagulation of blood. You know that when you cut the finger or hurt yourself, your wound does not continue to bleed for a long time. Usually, the blood stops flowing after some time. Do you know why? Blood exhibit coagulation or clotting in response to an injury or trauma. This is a mechanism to prevent excessive loss of blood from the body. You would have observed a dark reddish brown scum formed at the site of a cut or an injury over a period of time. It is a clot or coagulum formed mainly of a network of threads called fibrin. It is a clot or coagulum formed mainly of a network of threads called fibrin, in which dead and damaged formed elements of blood are trapped. अच्छी चल रही है ना, स्पीड स्लो, ठीक है, अच्छा आ रहा है ना समझ. अंडरस्टूड. Fibrins are formed by the conversion of inactive fibrinogens in the plasma by the enzyme thrombin. Fibrin are formed by the conversion of inactive fibrinogens in the plasma by the enzyme thrombin. Thrombins in turn are formed from another inactive substance present in the plasma called prothrombin. An enzyme complex thrombokinase is required for the above reaction. Thrombin in turn are formed from another inactive substance present in the plasma called prothrombin. An enzyme complex thrombokinase is required for the above reaction. This complex is formed by a series of linked enzymatic reactions, cascade process involving a number of factors present in the plasma in an inactive state. An injury or a trauma stimulates the platelets in the blood to release certain factors which activate the mechanism of coagulation. Understood? An injury or a trauma stimulates the platelet in the blood to release certain factors which activate the mechanism of coagulation. Certain factors released by the tissue at the site of injury also can initiate coagulation. Certain factors which are released by the tissue at the site of injury. Understood? Certain factors released by the tissue at the site of injury also can initiate coagulation. Calcium ions play an important role in clotting. कौन सा आयन? Calcium ion play an important role in clotting. So the next is lymph, that is tissue fluid. As the blood passes through the capillaries in tissues, some water along with many small water soluble substances move out into the spaces between the cells of tissues, leaving the larger protein and most of the formed element in the blood vessels. This fluid released out is called the interstitial fluid or tissue fluid. It has the same mineral distribution as that in plasma. इसके जैसा same distribution, mineral distribution as that in plasma. Exchange of nutrient, gases, etc. between the blood and the cells always occur through this fluid. Always आ गया इसलिए लाइन important हो गई. Exchange of nutrient, gases, etc. between the blood and the cell always occur through this fluid. कौन सा? lymph fluid, जिसको tissue fluid कहते हैं. An elaborate network of vessels called the lymphatic system collects this fluid and drains it back to the major veins. The fluid present in the lymphatic system is called the lymph. Lymph is a colorless fluid containing specialized lymphocytes which are responsible for the immune response of the body. Lymph is also an important carrier for nutrients, hormones, etc. Lymph is also an important carrier for nutrient, hormones, etc. Fats are absorbed through lymph in the lacteals present in the intestinal villi. Fats are absorbed through lymph in the lacteals present in the intestinal villi. Understood? Next is circulatory pathways. Circulatory pathways. The circulatory patterns are of two types, open or closed. Open circulatory system is present in arthropods and mollusks, in which blood pumped by the heart passes through large vessels into open spaces or body cavity called sinuses. Annelids and chordates have a closed circulatory system in which the blood pumped by the heart is always circulated through a closed network of blood vessels. This pattern is considered to be more advantageous as the flow of fluid can be more precisely regulated. कौन सा ज़्यादा advantageous है? Closed circulatory system. ठीक है? Why? Reason क्या है? क्या है reason? As the flow of fluid can be more precisely regulated. जो फ्लो है प्रिसाइसली रेगुलेट किया जा सकता है. ठीक है. All vertebrates possesses a muscular chambered heart. All आ गया है इसलिए लाइन इंपॉर्टेंट हो गई. All vertebrates possesses a muscular chambered heart. Fishes have a two-chambered heart with an atrium and a ventricle. Amphibian and the reptiles, except crocodiles, have three-chambered heart with two atria and a single ventricle. Whereas crocodiles, birds, and mammals also possesses a four-chambered heart with two atria and two ventricle. Amphibian and the reptiles, जिसमें क्रोकोडाइल को छोड़कर सबके थ्री चैम्बर्ड हेड होते हैं विथ टू एट्रिया एंड सिंगल वेंट्रिकल, एम्फीबियन और रेप्टाइल. बट क्रोकोडाइल जो है किस कैटेगरी में आता है? एम्फीबियन है या फिर रेप्टाइल है? क्या है क्रोकोडाइल? बताओ क्या है क्रोकोडाइल? बताओ जल्दी जल्दी सही आंसर बताओ क्रोकोडाइल का. क्या है? एम्फीबियन है या रेप्टाइल है? क्रोकोडाइल. अरे क्रोकोडाइल क्या है? रेप्टाइल है या एम्फीबियन है? क्रोकोडाइल्स होते हैं रेप्टाइल्स, नॉट एम्फीबियन. रेप्टाइल्स में आते हैं जिनका फोर चैम्बर्ड हार्ट होता है. फोर चैम्बर्ड हार्ट विथ टू एट्रिया एंड टू वेंट्रिकल. In fishes, the heart pumps out deoxygenated blood, which is oxygenated by the gills. Heart pump कर रहा है deoxygenated blood, which is oxygenated by the gills. and supplied to the body parts from where deoxygenated blood is returned to the heart, that is single circulation. In amphibians and reptiles, the left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the gills, lungs, skin, and the right atrium gets the deoxygenated blood from the other body parts. However, they get mixed up in the single ventricle, which pumps out mixed blood, that is incomplete double circulation. किसमें किस में होता है? एम्फीबियन और रेप्टाइल में इनकम्प्लीट डबल सर्कुलेशन होता है. अंडरस्टूड? क्लियर? इन बर्ड्स एंड मैमल्स, oxygenated and deoxygenated blood received by the left and the right atria. In birds and mammals, oxygenated and deoxygenated blood received by the left and the right atria respectively passes onto the ventricles of the same site. The ventricles pump it out without any mixing up, that is, two separate circulatory pathways are present in this organism. Hence, these animals have double circulation. Let us study the human circulatory system. So, we are starting with the human circulatory system. Human circulatory system, also called the blood vascular system, consists of a muscular chambered heart, a network of closed branching blood vessels, and blood, the fluid which is circulated. क्या क्या करता है blood vascular system? Muscular chamber heart, network of closed branching blood vessels, and the blood, the fluid which is circulated. Heart, the mesodermally derived organ. The mesodermally derived organ is situated in the thoracic cavity in between the two lungs, slightly tilted towards the left. Slightly tilted to the left. It has the size of a clenched fist. Clenched fist का मतलब क्या होता है पता है? मतलब मुट्ठी. ठीक है, आगे समझ. क्लेंज्ड फिस्ट का मतलब क्या होता है हिंदी में? मुट्ठी. सही बताया ना? इट इज प्रोटेक्टेड बाय ए डबल वॉल्ड membranous bag, that is pericardium, enclosing the pericardial fluid. Our heart has four chambers, two relatively small upper chambers called atria and two relatively lower chambers called ventricles. A thin muscular wall called the interatrial septum separates the right and the left atria, whereas a thick walled, the interventricular septum separates the left and the right ventricles. एक glitch है यहाँ पे. क्या है glitch? A thin muscular wall called the interatrial septum separates the right and the left atria, whereas a thick walled, the interventricular septum, जो atria के बीच में होती है thin और ventricle के बीच में होती है interventricular septum, वो होते हैं thick walled, separate the left and the right ventricle. The atria and the ventricle of the same site are also separated by a thick fibrous tissue called the atrioventricular septum. However, each of these septa are provided with an opening through which the two chambers of the same site are connected. The opening between the right atrium and the right ventricle is guarded by a wall formed of three muscular flaps or cusps. The opening between right atrium and right ventricle is guarded by a wall formed of three muscular flaps or cusps, the tricuspid wall, whereas a bicuspid or the mitral wall guards the opening between the left atrium and the left ventricle. The opening of the right and the left ventricle into the pulmonary artery and the aorta respectively, जो होता है opening of right and left ventricle. right की होती है pulmonary artery में और left की होती है aorta respectively, are provided by the semilunar valves. The valves in the heart allows the flow of blood only in one direction, that is from atria to the ventricle and from ventricle to the pulmonary artery or aorta. ठीक है. Valves in the heart allows the flow of blood only in one direction. Understood? These valves prevent any backward flow. The entire heart is made up of cardiac muscles. The walls of ventricle are much thicker than that of atria. A specialized cardiac musculature called the nodal tissue is also distributed in the heart. A patch of this tissue is present in the right upper corner of the right atrium called the sinoatrial node (SAN). Another mass of this tissue is seen in the lower left corner of the right atrium close to the atrioventricular septum called the atrioventricular node (AVN). A bundle of nodal fiber, atrioventricular bundle (AV bundle), continues from the AVN, which passes through the atrioventricular septa to emerge on the top of the interventricular septum and immediately divides into a right and left bundle. A patch of this tissue is present in the right upper corner of the right atrium called the sinoatrial node (SAN). Another mass of this tissue is seen in the lower left corner of the right atrium close to the atrioventricular septum called the AVN, atrioventricular node. A bundle of nodal fibers, atrioventricular bundle (AV bundle), continues from the AVN, which passes through the atrioventricular septa to emerge on the top of the interventricular septum and immediately divides in the right and the left bundle. Understood? आ गया समझ में? ठीक है, एक बार और. A bundle of nodal fiber, atrioventricular bundle (AV bundle) continues from the AVN, which passes through the atrioventricular septa to emerge on the top of the interventricular septum and immediately divides into right and left bundle. These branches give rise to minor fibers throughout the ventricular musculature of the respective sides and are called Purkinje fibers. The nodal musculature has the ability to generate action potential without any external stimuli, that is auto-excitable. However, the number of actions potential that could be generated in a minute vary at different parts of the nodal system. The number of action potential that could be generated in a minute vary at a different parts of the nodal system. The sinoatrial node can generate the maximum number of action potentials, that is 70 to 75 minute inverse to power 1, and is responsible for initiating and maintaining the rhythmic contractile activity of the heart. Therefore, it is called the pacemaker. Our heart normally beats 70 to 75 times in a minute, that is average 72 beats minute to power inverse. Next is cardiac cycle. How does the heart function? Let us take a look. To begin with, all the four chambers that are in relaxed state. All the four chambers of the heart that are in relaxed state, that is, they are in joint diastole. मतलब relaxation, diastole का मतलब. As the tricuspid and the bicuspid valves are open, blood from the pulmonary veins and the vena cava flows into the left and the right ventricle respectively through the left and the right atria. The semilunar valves are closed at this stage. The sinoatrial node now generates action potential which stimulates both the atria to undergo a simultaneous contraction, the atrial systole. This increases the flow of blood into the ventricle by about 30%. It's important. कितने percent? 30%. The action potential is conducted to the ventricular site by AVN and AV bundle, from where the bundle of these transmit it through the entire ventricular musculature. Understood? The action potential is conducted to the ventricular side by the AVN and AV bundle, from where the bundle of these transmits it through the entire ventricular musculature. This causes the ventricular muscles to contract, that is ventricular सिस्टोल। समझ में नहीं आ रहा है, चलो वापस से पढ़ता हूँ, ठीक है। द साइनोएट्रियल node now generates an action potential which stimulates both the atria to undergo simultaneous contraction, the atrial systole. This increases the flow of blood into the ventricle by about 30%. The action potential is conducted to the ventricular side by the AVN and AV bundle, from where the bundle of is transmit it through the entire ventricular musculature. This causes the ventricular muscles to contract, that is ventricular contraction. The atria undergoes relaxation, that is diastole, means relaxation, coinciding with the ventricular systole, means contraction. Ventricular systole increases the ventricular pressure, causing the closure of the tricuspid and the bicuspid valve due to the attempted backflow of blood into the atria. As the ventricular pressure increases further, the semilunar valves guarding the pulmonary artery, that is right side, and the aorta, that is left side, are forced open, allowing the blood in the ventricle to flow through these vessels into the circulatory pathways. The ventricles now relax, ventricular diastole, that is relaxation, and the ventricular pressure falls, causing the closure of the semilunar valves, which prevent the backflow of blood into the ventricles. Means blood को वापस नहीं जाने देना, ठीक है। As the ventricular pressure declines further, the tricuspid and the bicuspid valves are pushed open by the pressure in the atria exerted by the blood, which was being emptied into them by the veins. The blood now once again moves freely into the ventricles. The ventricle and the atria are now again in a relaxed, that is joint diastole state as earlier. Soon the sinoatrial node generates a new action potential, and the event described above are repeated in that sequence, and the process continues. This sequential event in the heart, which is cyclically repeated, is called the cardiac cycle, and it consists of a systole and the diastole of both the atria and ventricle. As mentioned earlier, the heart beats 72 times per minute. That is, that many cardiac cycles are performed per minute. Many cardiac cycles are performed per minute. From this, it could be deduced that the duration of a cardiac cycle is 0.8 seconds. क्या है duration cardiac cycle का? 0.8 seconds. During a cardiac cycle, each ventricle pumps out approximately 70 ml of blood, which is called the stroke volume. The stroke volume multiplied by the heart rate, that is number of beats per minute, gives out the cardiac output. Stroke volume को किससे मल्टीप्लाई करेंगे? हार्ट रेट से, नंबर ऑफ बीट्स पर मिनट से, तो क्या मिलेगा? कार्डियक आउटपुट. Therefore, the cardiac output can be defined as the volume of blood pumped out by each ventricle per minute and averages 5000 ml or 5 liters in a healthy individual. 5 liter or 5000 ml. The body has the ability to alter the stroke volume as well as the heart rate and thereby the cardiac output. For example, the cardiac output of an athlete will be much higher than that of an ordinary man. During each cardiac cycle, two prominent sounds are produced, which can be easily heard through the stethoscope. The first heard sound, that is love, is associated with the closure of the tricuspid and the bicuspid valve, whereas the second heard sound, dub, is associated with the closure of the semilunar valve. These sounds are of clinical diagnosis significance. These sounds are of clinical diagnosis significance. Next is electrocardiograph, that is ECG. You are probably familiar with this scene from a typical hospital television show. A patient is hooked up to a monitoring machine that shows voltage traces on its screen and makes the sound beep 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 G as the patient goes into the cardiac arrest. This type of machine electrocardiograph is used to obtain an electrocardiogram ECG. ECG is a graphical representation of the electrical activity of the heart during cardiac cycle. ECG is a graphical representation of the electrical activity of the heart during a cardiac cycle. To obtain a standard ECG, as shown in the figure, a patient is connected to the machine with 3 electrical leads, one to each wrist and one to the left ankle, one to each wrist and to the left ankle, that continuously monitor the heart activity. For a detailed evaluation of the heart's function, multiple leads are attached to the chest line. Here we will talk only about a standard ECG. कहाँ पे कनेक्ट होती है 3 इलेक्ट्रिकल लीड, वन टू ईच रिस्ट एंड टू द लेफ्ट एंकल. ठीक है, लेफ्ट एंकल पे और ईच रिस्ट. ईच पिक इन ECG is identified with a letter from P to T that corresponds to a specific electrical activity of the heart. यहाँ पे क्वेश्चन आते हैं definitely. The P wave represents the electrical excitation or depolarization of the atria, which leads to the contraction of both the atria. The QRS complex represents the depolarization of the ventricles, which initiate the ventricular contraction. The contraction starts shortly after Q and marks the beginning of the systole. The contraction starts shortly after the Q and marks the beginning of the systole, that is contraction. The T wave represents the return of the ventricle from excited to normal state, that is repolarization. The end of the T waves marks the end of systole. T wave mark कर रही है end of systole. Obviously, by counting the number of QRS complexes that occur in a given time period, one can determine the heartbeat rate of an individual. Since the ECG obtained from different individuals have roughly the same shape for a given lead configuration, any deviation from this shape indicate a possible abnormality or disease, and it is of great clinical significance. So the next is double circulation. The blood flows strictly by a fixed route through blood vessels, the arteries and veins. Basically, each artery and vein consists of 3 layers: an inner lining of squamous endothelium, the tunica intima, a middle layer of smooth muscles, an elastic fiber, the tunica media, and an external layer of fibrous connective tissue with collagen fiber, the tunica externa. Repeating it again, basically each artery and veins consist of 3 layers: an inner lining of squamous endothelium, the tunica intima, a middle layer of smooth muscles and elastic fiber, the tunica media, and an external layer of fibrous connective tissue with collagen fibers, the tunica externa. जो tunica intima होती है अंदर वाली, वो होती है इनर लाइनिंग ऑफ स्क्वामस एंडोथेलियम की. ठीक है, मिडिल लेयर होती है स्मूथ मसल और इलास्टिक फाइबर की. ठीक है, एंड एक्सटर्नल लेयर होती है फिब्रस कनेक्टिव टिश्यू विथ कोलाजन फाइबर. एक्सटर्नल होती है फिब्रस कोलाजन फाइबर की. द ट्यूनिका मीडिया इज कंपैरेटिवली थिन इन द वेन्स. जो ट्यूनिका मीडिया होती है वो कंपैरेटिवली थिन होती है. कहाँ पे? वेन्स में. मीन्स ट्यूनिका मीडिया मीन्स बीच वाली इज कंपैरेटिवली थिन इन द वेन्स. वेन्स में थिन होती है. अंडरस्टूड? As mentioned earlier, the blood pumped by the right ventricle enters the pulmonary artery, whereas the left ventricle pumps blood into the aorta. लेफ्ट कहाँ पे कर रहा है? aorta. ठीक है, अंडरस्टूड? Then let's proceed further. ठीक है, the deoxygenated blood pumped into the pulmonary artery is passed onto the lung, from where the oxygenated blood is carried by the pulmonary veins into the left atrium. This pathway constitutes the pulmonary circulation. The oxygenated blood entering the aorta is carried by a network of arteries, arterioles, and capillaries to the tissues, from where the deoxygenated blood is collected by a system of venules. From where the deoxygenated blood is collected by a system of venules, veins and vena cava, by a system of venules, veins and vena cava, and emptied into the right atrium. This is the systematic circulation. The systematic circulation provides nutrients, oxygen and other essential substances to the tissues and takes CO2 and other harmful substances away for elimination. A unique vascular connection exists between the digestive tract and the liver, called hepatic portal system. क्या बोलते हैं? Hepatic portal system. A unique vascular connection exists between the digestive tract and liver. डाइजेस्टिव ट्रैक्ट और लीवर के बीच, जिसे कहते हैं हेपाटिक पोर्टल सिस्टम. द हेपाटिक पोर्टल वेन कैरीज ब्लड फ्रॉम इंटेस्टाइन टू द लिवर. कहाँ से? फ्रॉम इंटेस्टाइन टू द लिवर बिफोर इट इज डिलीवर्ड टू द सिस्टमिक circulation. A special coronary system of blood vessels is present in our body exclusively for the circulation of blood to and from the cardiac musculature. A special coronary system of blood vessel is present in our body exclusively for the circulation of blood to and from the cardiac musculature. Diagram दिया हुआ है. Schematic plan of blood circulation in human. So the next is regulation of cardiac activity. Normal activity of the heart are regulated intrinsically, that is auto-regulated by special muscles, not all tissues. Hence the heart is called myogenic. A special neural center in the medulla oblongata can moderate the cardiac function through the autonomic nervous system, that is ANS. Neural signals through the sympathetic nervous system part of ANS, that is autonomic neural system का part, can increase the rate of heartbeat, the strength of ventricular contraction and thereby the cardiac output. क्या क्या increase कर सकते हैं? Rate of heartbeat, strength of ventricular contraction and thereby the cardiac output. On the other hand, parasympathetic neural signals, another component of ANS, autonomic neural system, decrease the rate of heartbeat, speed of conduction of action potential and thereby the cardiac output. पैरा जो है वो डिक्रीज करेगा. पैरासिम्पैथेटिक न्यूरल सिस्टम, अनदर कंपोनेंट ऑफ ANS, decreases the rate of heartbeat, speed of conduction of action potential and thereby the cardiac output. Adrenal medullary hormones can also increase the cardiac output. Adrenal medullary hormones can also increase the cardiac output. ठीक है, इंक्रीज की जगह डिक्रीज कर सकता है, करेक्ट है इंक्रीज. Adrenal medullary hormones can also increase the cardiac output. Disorders of circulatory pathway. First is high blood pressure, that is hypertension. Hypertension is the term for blood pressure that is higher than normal 120 to 80. In this measurement, 120 mmHg millimeters of mercury pressure is the systolic or pumping pressure and 80 mmHg is diastolic or resting pressure. If repeated checks of blood pressure of an individual is 140 to 90, 140/90 or higher, it shows hypertension. Hypertension in the term of blood pressure that is higher than normal. Normal क्या है 120 और 80. इन दिस मेजरमेंट 120 जो mmHg होता है मर्क्यूरी के प्रेशर सिस्टोलिक होता है मीन्स कॉन्ट्रैक्शन और पंपिंग प्रेशर, एंड 80 mmHg जो होता है डायस्टोलिक रिलैक्सेशन और रेस्टिंग प्रेशर. इफ रिपीटेड चेक ऑफ द इंडिविजुअल इज 140 to 90, that is 140 over 90 or shows higher, it shows hypertension. Higher blood pressure leads to heart diseases and also affect vital organs like brain and kidney. Next is coronary artery diseases, CAD. क्वेश्चन आते हैं यहाँ पे डिसऑर्डर्स से. Coronary artery disease often referred to as atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis affect the vessels that supply blood to the heart muscle. It is caused by deposit of calcium, fat, cholesterol and fibrous tissues which make the lumen of artery narrower. यहाँ पे broader कुछ भी कर सकता है, चेंज पर करेक्ट है. which makes the lumen of the artery narrower. narrower का मतलब क्या होता है पता है? क्या होता है narrower का मतलब? पहले तो इट इज़ कॉज्ड बाय डिपोजिशन ऑफ कैल्शियम, फैट, कोलेस्ट्रॉल एंड फिब्रस टिश्यू. कैल्शियम, फैट, कोलेस्ट्रॉल एंड फिब्रस टिश्यू विच मेक्स द लुमन ऑफ आर्टरी नैरोवर, जिसका हिंदी में मीनिंग होता है सकरा, मीन्स टंग. ठीक है, अंडरस्टूड. सो द नेक्स्ट इज angina. It is also called angina pectoris. A symptom of acute chest pain appears when no enough oxygen is reaching the heart muscle. Angina can occur in men and women of any age, but it is more common among the middle-aged and elderly. It occurs due to the condition that affect the blood flow. किससे occur होता है? It occurs due to the condition that affects the blood flow. Next is heart failure. Heart failure means the state of the heart when it is not pumping blood effectively enough to meet the needs of the body. It is sometimes called congestive heart failure because congestion of the lung is one of the main symptoms of the disease. It is sometimes called congestive heart failure because congestion of the lung is one of the main symptoms of this disease. Heart failure is not same as the cardiac arrest, that is when the heart stops beating, or a heart attack when the heart muscles are suddenly damaged or damaged by an inadequate blood supply. Understood? Heart failure means the state of heart when it is not pumping blood effectively enough to meet the needs of the body. ठीक है, it is sometimes called congestive heart failure because congestion of the lung is one of the main symptoms of this disease. Next we are going to read the summary. Vertebrates circulate blood, a fluid connective tissue in their body to transport essential substances to the cell and to carry waste substance from there. Another fluid, lymph tissue fluid, is also used for the transport of certain substances. Blood comprises of a fluid matrix, plasma and formed element. Red blood cells, erythrocytes, white blood cells, WBC leukocytes and platelets, thrombocytes constitute the formed element. Formed element में आते हैं RBC, WBC और platelet. Blood of the human are grouped into AB and O. They sum based on the presence or absence of two surface antigens, A and B, on the RBCs. Another blood grouping is also done based on the presence or absence of the another antigen called rhesus factor, or the RH, on the surface of RBCs. The space between cells in the tissue contain a fluid derived from the blood called the tissue fluid. The space between the cells in the tissue contain a fluid derived from the blood called the tissue fluid. This fluid called lymph is almost similar to blood. This fluid called the lymph is almost similar to blood except for the protein contained and the formed element. Except for the protein content. कौन सा fluid? Tissue fluid called lymph is almost similar to blood except for the protein content and the formed element. Exception किसका है? Protein content का, formed element का. All vertebrates and few invertebrates have a closed circulatory system. Our circulatory system consists of a muscular pumping organ, heart, a network of vessels, and a fluid, blood. Heart has two atria and two ventricles. Cardiac musculature is auto-excitable. Sinoatrial node (SAN) generate the maximum number of action potential per minute, that is 70 to 75 per minute, and therefore it sets the pace of the activity of the heart. Hence, it is called pacemaker. The action potential causes the atria and the ventricle to undergo contraction, that is systole, followed by their relaxation, that is diastole. The systole forces the blood to move from the atria to the ventricle and to the pulmonary artery and the aorta. The cardiac cycle is formed by the sequential events in the heart by which is cyclically repeated and is called the cardiac cycle. A healthy person shows 72 such cycles per minute. About 70 ml of blood is pumped out by each ventricle during a cardiac cycle and is called the stroke or beat volume. Volume of blood pumped out by each ventricle of heart per minute is called the cardiac output. Volume of blood pumped out by each ventricle of heart per minute is called the cardiac output and is equal to the product of stroke volume and heart rate, approx 5 liter. A important line, a volume of blood pumped out by each ventricle of heart per minute is called the cardiac output and is equal to the stroke volume and heart rate, approx 5 liter. The electrical activity of the heart can be recorded from the body surface by using the electrocardiograph, and the recording is called electrocardiogram, ECG, which is of clinical importance. We have a complete double circulation, that is two circulatory pathways, namely pulmonary and systematic, are present. The pulmonary circulation starts by pumping of deoxygenated blood by the right ventricle, which is carried to the lung, where it is oxygenated and returned to the left atrium. The systematic circulation starts with pumping of oxygenated blood. The systematic, again repeating it, the pulmonary circulation starts by the pumping of deoxygenated blood by the right ventricle, which is carried to the lungs, where it is oxygenated and returned to the left atrium. The systematic circulation starts with the pumping of oxygenated blood by the left ventricle to the aorta, which is carried to all the body tissues, and the deoxygenated blood from there is collected by the veins and returned to the right atrium. Though the heart is auto-excitable, its function can be moderated by neural and hormonal mechanisms. किससे मॉडरेट हो सकता है? न्यूरल एंड hormonal mechanisms. With this, we completed the chapter. Thank you for hearing.